Welcome back. Now, earlier this month, the federal government approved the sum of 701 billion naira as what is termed as power assurance guarantee for the Nigerian bulk electricity trader to guarantee payment for the evacuation of electricity produced by the generation companies to the national grid, who will in turn be able to pay gas suppliers. How will this trickle down to consumers who yearn for constant power supply? I'm being joined by a director at the Eco Distribution Company and principal partner, George Etomi and Partners. Mr. George Etomi, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Etomi. Right, 701 billion naira intervention fund. Is that the lifeline needed to rejig the sector?
Well, it's not the entire lifeline needed. This 701 billion addresses the production side of the value chain, which is why it's directed primarily at the GenCos, who should be able to pay the gas suppliers. As we've said many times before, there has been a gap of close to 1 trillion naira in the entire value chain. So this is one way of closing that gap. Now, this will ensure that there is a guarantee, there are funds guaranteed to pay for power whenever the GenCo supplied to the bulk trader. So to that extent, it addresses the issue, but from the production side, because you must then look at issues to do with transmission, which is very key, because the entire value chain must work in one synchronized system for this whole fund to have the desired effect. So when you have the transmission issue also addressed, the wheeling capacity right now is about 5,000 megawatts. I know the other time the minister said they could do up to 7,500 megawatts, but we're looking at consistent ability to wheel, because it's important for us not to have those breaks that we normally get. We're looking at about 5,000. Now, with supplies now guaranteed and more power coming into the network, then it's important for transmission to have the wheeling capacity to then push it on to the distribution companies. So that's quite a hiccup. If you look at the budgetary allocation, for example, for TCN, there's only about 40 billion naira provided. But if you look at what the MITO, the multi-year tariff order for CAPEX, envisages for them, it's about 418 billion naira. So that's a really far cry from what they should be having.
When you talk about the hiccup, is it about the tariff?
No,
because one would wonder, okay, from the GenCo to transmission, then one would ask, how does it get to you as DISCOs to ensure that, of course, it now touches the consumers who need the lights?
I was coming to that, because once you are able also to address the wheeling ability of the transmission company, then it now becomes a function of the distribution companies. The distribution companies themselves will be faced with the usual challenges that we have. One, and which is the most critical, is at what cost, at what price do they sell the power? Because if we still have the constraints we have, where they're unable to sell power at the cost at which they're getting it, then you're still going to have a shortfall, which then brings us to the question of what these funds are. Are they a subsidy or are they a loan? Because if it's a subsidy, then it means the government would have to be replenishing it from time to time. But if it's a loan, then you must be looking to the source of consumption for you to be able to pay back, as it were, feed the system back. So the issue, therefore, of the tariffs must be addressed. If the tariffs become cost reflective, the word that has been so badly battered is there, then there is that modicum of hope that you'll be able to address the liquidity problems in the entire value chain.
Now, are you advocating that the electricity tariff should be increased?
It's not a question of advocating it. If you want market forces to determine your pricing, then you must go all the way down it, because gas, for example, is a pass-through cost in this entire value chain. So as it comes, it goes through to the GenCos. The GenCos just simply push it on to the DISCOs. Now, the DISCOs are then constrained from pushing it on to the end user. That is where the problem is. In some cases, NEC, the regulator, tried to address it by allowing what I call sculpted tariffs, where the discos are expected to recover these costs at a much later period. But it still produces the problem of shortfalls, and their books are not good for this purpose. Many banks are reluctant now, as it were, to lend further to the discos. And the discos are not, in terms of risk allocation, they're not best positioned to carry that risk. So it's either you do an adjustment to the tariffs, or we then clearly understand that there's going to be subsidy up to a point where you can then get cost-reflective tariffs. And I always understand the argument about cost-reflective tariffs. For the consumer is, give me the power first before you talk about tariff increase. And that's arguably a very good argument. But I'm just sort of putting out to you what the real the economics of the entire value chain
now,
is. So it's got to be addressed.
Is it all about the tariff? Because a lot of questions have gone on almost 5 years now since the privatization of the power sector, yet we're still having epileptic power supply, and yet what has been there born in front has been tariff, increasing tariff, and all of that. Is it all about increasing tariff? What are the other challenges, the discos probably might be facing that perhaps is stopping you guys from, giving the consumers the light? Now let's use, for instance, the disco, your distribution, or rather distribution zone where you are. What are the major challenges discos have?
Okay, let me quickly say, it's been 3 years, more or less, since the privatization, not really 5, because it's important for us to know that because in the performance agreement, we have a 5-year period to meter all our customers. So people are always screaming and shouting, why haven't you metered everyone? Which so is actually one of the major...
You still have 2 more years to really...
It's good to put it in perspective.
Okay.
It's good to put it in perspective and all that. Metering is one of the challenges. And then metering also, many people don't understand, is also a function of the right pricing. Because when you say all customers should be metered and your tariffs are not cost reflective, it takes that much longer for the cost of 1 meter to be recovered by the average disco. The last time we did the analysis, it will take you about 18 years. Is that why a lot of people
don't have meters?
No, I'm just telling you, it's a financial constraint, because even within the capex that we're allowed, what we're allowed for discos, most discos have exhausted, and yet people are not fully metered. Because we can't spend except we get authorization from NEC, because it all goes to your funding mechanism. So, which was why CAPME helped in a while to bridge that funding gap. So there's also, that's to address your question squarely, that's one of the major problems we face, metering, trying to get everybody metered, so that we can reduce these arguments over estimated billings.